Elden Ring's Coliseum is in disrepair. Its matchmaking is shoddy, incentives are non-existent, and the plethora of new and unbalanced items introduced in the DLC are ruining people's willingness to engage at all. But can it be saved? The good news is, yes, it can. The bad news is, it'll take more than some simple balance patches. Let us begin. When Elden Ring launched without any arena multiplayer mode, it wasn't without precedent. Dark Souls 1 and 3 both had released without an arena and later added them in DLC. The community was also reassured by the physical presence of 3 arenas in the game that simply could not be entered. Of course, they must have a purpose. They can't just be lore fixtures. And those players were right. Within the first year of the game's release, FromSoft released a free DLC update, granting players access to the Coliseums. Anyone looking for dedicated, consistent PvP had their prayers answered in that moment. Right? Well, the Coliseums had a major, immediate flaw that separated them from previous arenas. They were just plain circles. They each have a different visual theme reflecting the area in which they're found, each unlocking a different mode, but each just a basic circle. I should clarify that the Caelid Arena does have 4 pillars within the circle to change things up, but is otherwise identical. So why am I framing this like a problem? Is it really an issue if the Coliseums are just circle arenas reminiscent of their historical counterpart? Well, yeah, it is. Having verticality in an arena is important for a number of reasons. It can provide cover, create surprise scenarios, and generally make for a more dynamic battleground. More than that, the arena signifies the flavor of combat expected. A circular arena with no real obstacles suggests combat is intended to be close range and melee focused, which makes sense when you think about the context of ancient Roman gladiatorial combat. But ancient Rome, this is not. No, in Elden Ring, we have magic. Magic that functions more or less like a firearm, easily able to cover the span of the arena and deal punishing damage. Not exactly good sport. But that's not to say magic should be prohibited. Spellcasters are every bit as valid as any other playstyle. It's the job of the arena to facilitate different styles. Beyond spellcasters, most bow builds and any other playstyle not suited to obstacle-free combat has a very difficult time succeeding in arena matches. Anything's possible, but I don't think it's all that controversial to suggest the layout of the Coliseums could be a lot more than they are. Especially when this is a lesson FromSoftware shouldn't need to learn. The Battle of Stoicism, added to the first Dark Souls game via the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, was also built into a Coliseum. It just had the good sense to have multiple floors in the arena, giving players a number of ways to engage. It demanded players consider their positioning and disallowed them from being able to just mindlessly sprint or spam at an opponent, thereby encouraging more strategy. High ground and low ground are strong battlefield concepts that can be replicated quite literally in a good arena. Denying players the ability to obfuscate their positioning or change their angle of attack is an extremely limiting design that previous arenas knew to avoid. So if they want to fix the Coliseum, they should start with better arenas. But level design is not the only innovation forgotten from that first arena. The Battle of Stoicism had another feature that I feel would be extremely beneficial to Elden Ring: level brackets. This is something I've talked about before, but as a quick recap, the level brackets were that arena's method of matching players. The brackets were 1 to 50, 51 to 100, 101 to 150, 151 to 200, and 201 up. Meaning whenever you entered the matchmaking, the game checked your level and put you into a pool with other players within that bracket. It's an incredibly simple system that isn't all that different from how the modern system works. The major difference is the arena of Elden Ring matches using the cooperation formula rather than dedicated level brackets. Or does it? I actually have no confirmation of how the current system matches players. I assume it works the same as the system in Dark Souls 3, as virtually all of Elden Ring's multiplayer features are directly ported from that system. Then again, I am also unsure how the matchmaking of that system worked. The Fextra Life wiki lists it as using the same formula as cooperative summoning, but none of those values are listed for the player to view in-game. Which is essentially the problem. Without independent testing and community efforts, how do players know what level they should be? As much as I am a fan of self-governance, I think a system controlled by the developer would benefit from some clearly defined standard, and I see level brackets as a good solution. Take, for example, what is considered the modern level meta, 125 to 150. With a level bracket system, both of these would be matched together, meaning any player at 125 would have a disadvantage in the fight and would simply level up to remove it. Now, you may notice that would completely destroy the 125 meta. It would become invalid in this scenario. But let's look at the alternative. In the current system, those level ranges may or may not be grouped together. 10 levels plus or minus 10% is a relative value dependent on a host player. If the host is level 150, then they can match with players between 125 and 175. That puts a player at 125 not only at a disadvantage against a 150, but puts both players at a disadvantage against a 175. From the perspective of the 175, their host range would be somewhere around 147 to 203. If they assume players are most likely found at 125 to 150, and that 150 can host for 125, they're incentivized to hold on to that higher level to gain an advantage. As you can see, this creates a terrible situation where players are constantly incentivized to keep climbing to the top of an assumed range to get whatever edge they can over their opponents, and the more players that do this, the higher the levels climb. Someone needs to anchor the system, and doing so is at their own expense. Not only would they be at a disadvantage, but activity across the board could suffer. Not exactly an enticing system. For me, it seems like the clear and easy solution is for the level range to be set by the system via level bracket matchmaking. A bracket of 101 to 150 telegraphs to a player that if their build requires more than 100 levels but fewer than 200, they should just make it work at 150. No need to worry about what other players are doing because they'll just go to the end of the bracket. And if for whatever reason a player doesn't want to level their build up to the top end of the range, they can still compete wherever they fall and won't have a negative or exploitative impact on matchmaking activity versus if they were to be the host. There's the added benefit that a range of 50 levels is wider than anything below 150 would provide as is, giving more players the opportunity to participate as they progress their build. And this keys into a big part of where I take issue with the Coliseum. It does not accommodate just playing the regular game. Trying to find a match outside of the meta level, especially at low level, is functionally impossible. What are the odds that someone else is matchmaking within 10 to 15 levels of you at level 45 at the same time with the same settings and same weapon upgrade level? Oh, right. Weapon upgrade level matchmaking. This is another area the brackets could easily solve. In Elden Ring, you're not only matched by your character level, but by your maximum weapon level upgrade. The ranges are obnoxious because of the rounding required between standard weapons that go up to plus 25 and somber weapons that go up to plus 10, more or less requiring you to just look up the matches for whatever range you're at. Level brackets could incorporate weapon level into their matchmaking. In a 1 to 50 bracket, you could have up to plus 10 or plus 4 weapons. At 51 to 100, plus 17 or plus 7. At 101 and above, plus 25 or plus 10. It'd take out all the guesswork of trying to find a match without adhering to only the most popular selection, while also facilitating structures for multiple levels of play. And I understand FromSoft's desire to simply use the same matchmaking formula across the board. It's easier that way. For them. But Coliseum matches don't work like invasions or summon signs. The match doesn't begin until all participants are ready, meaning you can't force join an encounter in progress. The lopsided level ranges are meant to balance the lopsided nature of invasions, whereas an arena puts players on relatively even footing. Not to mention, the system is obscured to create a sense of randomness and happenstance when in overworld multiplayer. You are meant to take summon signs as good fortune and invasion as bad luck. A dedicated arena doesn't need those things because there's no opportunity to stumble upon these events. You are actively seeking them out while avoiding playing any other part of the game. It is a full commitment from every participant. And by allowing the system to rely on that same obscure structure with no consideration for the core concepts of dedicated matchmaking, it makes it that much harder to engage with the system. Level brackets solve so many of these issues by way of clear and concise information for the player. If you want to find a match, you're in this bracket. You can take your character to the limit of that bracket, which is where you'll find everyone else who did the same. No need to worry about someone getting an unfair advantage or guessing what levels are most popular. I should say that this wouldn't fix everything. Level brackets could standardize builds, but they can't make people want to play. For that, we need incentives. That's right, I'm going to be so bold as to suggest you should get something for your efforts. In a recent patch, FromSoftware was kind enough to restore used items while in the Coliseum, but they haven't added any reason to actually participate. This means if you want to fight in the Coliseum, not only do you need to stop playing the game entirely to wait for a match, but when your 5-minute match is over, you're none the richer. No rune arcs for the winner, no special NPC shot, no titles, nothing to encourage you to get in the arena and test your mettle. In a game with as much to do as Elden Ring, asking players to stop their 50 to 100 hour playthrough to try and find a PvP match might not be all that appealing without some sense of progression or reward. And sure, PvP is its own reward, but in a much more real sense, rewards are also their own reward. For a game that facilitates a high level of player skill and demands individual performance, it should give incentives to players to learn to succeed. This dynamic is already addressed with invasions in a way. Players who want to cooperate with their friends may not want to be invaded, but the incentive of multiplayer is strong enough to get them to engage with the system. It's a good implementation that supports both mechanics. The Coliseum, however, has no reason to engage. It's a waste of time for anyone who isn't solely looking to fight. And you might think, well, yeah, that's the point. But why not make it part of the greater gaming experience? If you could earn items, skills, spells, or other things by participating in the Coliseum, it'd be something players could engage with while not sacrificing progress. And I'm sure there are many people who have no interest in PvP incentives and do not want the game to require it for progression. To those players, let's have a quick sidebar to get this out of the way. Half measures don't work. A game needs to pick a lane to make its system work. It can't please everyone. It has to choose what it wants to be good at what it is. My vote is for it to do what it's currently doing, only with a better balance and focus on PvP mechanics. Elden Ring has done a bad job with PvP, but still has the most interesting system versus any other modern competitor. If you don't want the game to focus more on PvP, or if you don't want it to have PvP at all, you're signaling that you want the game to ignore or outright abandon its most unique feature, and I fundamentally disagree. Sidebar over. My point is, incentives make sense. If you give someone a reason to do something, they're more likely to do it. If activity is an issue with the system, improving activity is good. It's very simple. And incentives can help players to participate in the game's lore, like in the form of Covenant rewards. Obviously, Covenants are a sorely missed feature for many players. They help to provide a sense of character identity and direction. Imagine how much more likely players would be to engage with a system if you could earn some rewards by getting a certain number of victories fighting under a demigod's banner. The Great Rune system could easily act as a system flag to determine your team or what rewards you'd get. Rare items like rune arcs or starlight shards could be farmed in this way, and you could earn spells, weapons, and skills related to those covenants. And they could make them farmable in other ways, offline or via questlines, if they didn't want to lock them explicitly behind a multiplayer system that isn't accessible to everyone. But giving players a reward for participating in a game mode encourages them to do so. Again, it's very simple. And there are any number of ways to implement these sorts of systems, and FromSoftware have dabbled with them in every game except Elden Ring. If they want people to use the system, they should make it interesting by showing interest in its development and support. But I don't want to get too deep into hypotheticals or wish lists because I know FromSoftware is just not that interested in this sort of player fulfillment. They want a deliberate, single-player focused tone for their games where the multiplayer acts as an accent to that experience. You are meant to feel alone because it is a lonely world. That's why cooperation isn't more readily available. It's why PvP isn't more inviting. You're meant to struggle on every front because this is, in all but name, Dark Souls. But the Coliseum should be the exception to that idea. It should be a way for Elden Ring to embrace everything about its system that isn't captured in the standard progression. The obtuse nature of a bad menu with unclear matchmaking parameters is exactly how you make a system for no one. It gives nothing to players who value their time, and it gives nothing to players who don't. It just doesn't have a purpose for anyone who isn't looking explicitly for a duel. And that shouldn't be the case. 3v3 is a meaningful form of multiplayer. It deserves to be better facilitated. Invasions only work because they're forced by creating high incentives to opt in. Arenas need to follow the same logic if they're going to work, lest they become dead content. There are all sorts of little things the Coliseum could fix to help, too. Players need to be able to queue as a partial team and match against other partial or full teams. It can't be so rigid and obscure. They should let you do other things while you're waiting for a match. Maybe even have a physical multiplayer waiting room where players can interact. I don't know, anything would be better than running circles around the round table. And beyond the Coliseum, what I'm advocating for speaks to the larger PvP cultural shift I'd like to see with FromSoftware. I love the nature of their games. I love the harsh and oppressive worlds. I think PvP fits perfectly into the core concepts. I just want to see it grow. There isn't another series that properly captures this style of combat and character building, let alone while facilitating PvP. It's a system that deserves to have flagship endgame content in the form of an accessible and robust multiplayer experience, starting with the Coliseum and eventually growing into a 100-player battle royale that takes place in the vastness of the open world and allows players to drop in and drop out as needed, creating a never-ending battleground of PvP glory. But that's a topic for another video. For what I want to see in a nutshell, I really want better arenas. They could reuse assets from legacy dungeons, and it'd make all the difference just to have multiple floors. I want level brackets too. I'm not thrilled arbitrarily trying to figure out where I want my build to sit and whether or not I want to respect play at 125 and get ganked by 150s, or play at 168 and try to game the system. And I want some incentives. Give me a goal or some reason to keep going even when the matches aren't going my way. Keep me invested. Oh, and I really do want to be able to queue as a partial team against other partials. I know that part might seem insignificant, but if you have 3 friends that want to PvP, finding matches is basically impossible. At least it has been for me. Less strict matchmaking is so helpful for activity that pretty much any trade-off would be worthwhile. And I know I didn't touch on item balance because, frankly, that's a point of conversation that From seems to pay a lot of attention to as is, and I'm not nearly as concerned about those issues in the long term. Especially because, without changes like what I'm suggesting, none of it will matter. That's all for this one. If you want to see FromSoftware address the Coliseum, like and share this video, and leave a comment about what changes you're most interested in. We're in the final patching stage for Elden Ring, and while my expectations for the arenas are low, there's a lot that could be done with relatively little investment. Otherwise, I really appreciate all the player discourse around these topics and the DLC. My last video was a call to action for FromSoft to fix the Taunter's Tongue, and I could not be more grateful for the overwhelming support from my audience. It's done better than someone at my scale has any right to expect, and it's just really encouraging. There's a lot of great content coming out right now, and important issues are being raised, so be sure to check out other content creators who are voicing their concerns and get in on the conversation. Shadow of the Erdtree hasn't been good to PvPers, and we'd all love to see From rectify that in the coming months before they're finished with the game entirely. And please consider subscribing if you like this sort of content and want to see me give my analysis on any other topics. Until then, thank you for watching.